Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, we're going to take a moment to make sure that everyone can connect in the language of your choice. Bienvenidos a todos. Antes de comenzar, vamos a asegurarnos que todos puedan conectarse en el idioma que eligen. You have the option to select English or Spanish as your main language during the meeting. Tienen la opción de elegir el inglés o español como el idioma que va a usar durante nuestra sesión. You'll be able to switch between the different language channels and adjust the volume ratio between the meeting speakers and the interpreter. Tienen la opción para cambiar su idioma y ajustar el volumen entre los diferentes canales. To do this, for desktop users, click on the interpretation icon on the bottom left that looks like a globe. Select your preferred interpretation language or original audio if you want to hear the audio without interpretation. Para hacer esto, si está usando una computadora, hazle clic en el símbolo de interpretación que queda hacia abajo a la izquierda y parece un globo. Y elige el idioma que quiera escuchar para esta sesión. Si quiere elegir español, por favor, hazle clic en Spanish. O se puede quedar donde dice el audio original si quiere oír el audio sin interpretación. For mobile users who would like to listen in Spanish, select the More option, then Interpretation, then select Spanish and Audio Balance Level. Si está conectándose usando su teléfono, su celular, y quisiera escuchar en español, presione donde dice More, entonces Interpretación, y elige Spanish para elegir español. With much gratitude to our interpreters today, Claudia, Jonathan, and Juniper. We also have live captioning available. You can access that by clicking on the multimedia viewer box that is usually located towards the right of your screen. Now we will begin. Hello and thank you for joining us today for our first session in our 5-part series, Culturally Rooted Traditions in Healing and Resistance. I'm Gabriela Zapata Alma, I use they, them pronouns, and I'm the Associate Director of the National Center on Domestic Violence, Trauma, and Mental Health. It is my pleasure to open our session today. First, we'll go over some technical details of the WebEx software that we're using today. Your screen might look a little different depending on the kind of device you're using to connect. Towards the bottom of the right-hand side of the screen, you can find the chat box. You may have to click on the chat icon on the bottom right of your screen to open it. We welcome your thoughts, questions, and resources throughout the session today. For tech questions, you can directly chat Carla Alegria, Project Manager with our center. If you get disconnected at any point, return to the email you received with the original webinar link and re-enter the training. Sometimes the sound cuts out because of the internet connection. Feel free to call back in if that becomes a problem. If you're experiencing technical difficulties and are unable to contact Carla Alegria, please reach out to WebEx Tech Support to resolve any issues. That phone number, which Carla will also post in the chat, is 1-866-229-3239. Please feel free to share your questions throughout the session. Tori Weinkoop, Training and Technical Assistance Manager with our center, will collect your questions and then moderate the question and answer session at the end. Now to introduce our speakers. We are thrilled to have Parise Nichelle Shango-Didi Ogunleye, owner and founder of Do the Healing Work, and Carol Cano, founder and executive director of Braided Wisdom, joining us today. For more information, please check out their bios in the webinar announcement, which also includes links to both their organizations. Before I turn things over to our speakers, I'd like to take a moment to open our space with a poem by Nayira Waheed from her book Salt. All that was taken from me is still here. root, immortal. Thank you, everyone. I will now welcome Parise Michel to the virtual stage.
Thank you so much for having me. This is so important and a cause that is very, very near and dear to my heart. So I hope and pray that everybody listening in, as well as everybody participating today in this conversation that is so much needed in our communities, are well and receive all of the words and the guidance today with the spirit of love in which it's intended. So, I'm going to start my talk today by posing a question. What is resistance? Well, the dictionary defines it as a refusal to accept or to comply with something. Every revolution in history is a result of resistance. But is that where it starts? Does it start as a group movement? Or does it start in the heart, mind, and gut of a single person? How does a person born into abuse and oppression even realize that there is something wrong? Family, friends, and even society tells us that this is normal, that it's right, that this is how things are supposed to be. Yet there is something inside of us that screams no. The first time we hear it, we usually ignore it because the whisper of defiance, even in our own heads, is enough to terrify us. Well, the next time it becomes a little louder and a little harder to ignore. Finally, that voice becomes so loud that the fear pushes us into action. Every indigenous culture has a word for this entity. The Choctaw call it Shlip, the Taino call it Zemi, the Celtic call it Biotali, the Spanish call it Esperito, the Ghanaians call it Kra, the Yoruba call it Ori, the Japanese call it Tamashi, the Hindu call it Jiva, and thousands of languages and tribes and schools of thought all have different words for the same entity, the spirit or the soul of an individual. As we go through life, we see the world through the core beliefs that we hold. And the majority of these beliefs are found and formed in childhood. They begin in what we're told, but the foundation is fully cemented by what we see, experience, and our perception of it all. These beliefs shape the way that we see the world because the way that we see the world is really a reflection of the way that we view ourselves. It's the core of what we believe we deserve, what we accept, what we strive for, and what we believe is normal and acceptable. For most of us, this is not a new information. The things that I'm saying today are not new. Maybe the way that I framed it today is new, but the concept certainly is not. For those of us that grew up in violent homes as children, kindness becomes kind of suspicious, right? Statistics show us over and over again that the victims of abuse either marry or partner with abusers or turn into abusers themselves. Even knowing this little tidbit of information, modern psychology often does not cure violence. It does not cure abuse. How can that be, though? A society that can clone an entire human being can't heal a person of violent tendencies. How does this happen? Well, It's because we have become a society of symptom curers. The very shelves in the stores that we go to are filled with medicines, Mucinex, NyQuil, Dayquil if you're sick, but you still got stuff to do. Theraflu, Robitussin. We can go on and on and on and on and on, right? And all of them treat different ailments. You got a cough, sneeze, runny eyes, muscle aches, headaches. Oh, there's something for everything. But when you go to the doctor, they will tell you that there's no way to cure a common cold. Yet our ancestors have been using oil of oregano for viral infections for centuries. Doctors will tell you that there's no cure for diabetes. But Chinese medicine has been using bitter melon and berbene since antiquity. The Ghanaians have a symbol. It's pretty simple in its presentation. It's a bird with its head turned backwards, but its feet are moving forward. It typically has an egg in its mouth. It's very simple. A bird looking backwards with an egg in its mouth. But that symbol is actually a concept. And that concept is called Sankofa, translated from the Ghanaian language. Sankofa means to retrieve, to go back, and to get. It's connected to the proverb that it's not bad to go back to get that which you have forgotten. It means to go back to the past and bring the good back to the present. It reminds us to utilize the methodology that our ancestors have left for us to heal what has been broken. But we live in a society that we throw away things. We literally pride ourselves on the ability to purchase things that can only and is meant to be used once and then thrown away. But those of us that come from poverty know that even these things can be restored and used again and again and again. You don't believe me? Well, how many of us have grease in a container next to the stove in the kitchen and you use it again? Just me? I'm the only person that does that? Okay, I got another one then. How many of us have plastic grocery bags, a collection of it, under the sink in the kitchen? Hmm? That grocery bag is now an ice pack for if you hurt yourself or one of the babies hurt themselves and you pack it in ice and you tie it up and you put it on there to heal. Or that plastic bag now becomes a garbage bag for little messes, like in the car, right? Or a lunch bag, or so many other things. What about the tub that used to originally have butter in it that now holds leftovers? You see, one thing that adversity teaches us is how to survive. And a society that says, because we've made a mistake, because we've been broken, because we've been through adversity, because we grew up poor, because we don't have all of these levels of education, because, that we're useless. The one thing that adversity teaches us is survival. We remember how to survive. So when I say look back, I'm not necessarily talking about reliving those painful memories again. What I'm saying is to look at that situation and to find your strength because it's there. It's always been there. Memory can be a crazy thing, though. It can take you back to times of pain and hurt. It can take you back to time when you felt broken. My personal memory takes me back to being 2 years old. I remember being molested or having the adults call it that. But in the moment, I was more curious than afraid. What actually frightened me was the horror and the disgust on my mother's face when I told her. I learned from that experience that it was better to hide it. When it happened again at 13, I remember the shame. I remember telling my biological father and being told that my abuser was a good boy and that society was too hard on Black boys so that we were going to let it go, so that he could so that he can live a decent life, pardon me. He was 26, mind you. I was 13. I learned in that instance that I would not be protected. I learned at 19, pregnant with my first child and being beaten by his father, that I deserved to be beaten because I was broken, because I was damaged goods. And I learned at 28 that I was so tired. My memory takes me to a time when I was going to get a tattoo. In some way, maybe my subconscious, I wanted the pain. I wanted to feel the pain. I wanted to feel something, anything. I had become so numb. Well, that day I came across two things that saved my life. The first one was the Sankofa symbol. That symbol, although I didn't have it tattooed on that day, it did make me wonder, what the heck did my ancestors do? Go back and get what? But I knew that there had to be something because therapy certainly was not working. Yes. I had left that violent relationship from 19. And yes, I went on to have other relationships. By that time, I had given birth to a beautiful, smart, and intelligent daughter. But clearly, something wasn't working because I still frequently had thoughts of hurting myself. I was on anxiety medication and I was exhausted. I couldn't even relish in the thought of perishing because I had two small children that had no one but me. I got through that day. And then I called my spiritual godmother because I certainly didn't feel any better. Beautiful tattoo, though. She asked me if I knew about an entity called Eshu. I said no. She told me to research, and I did. And I discovered Eshu. Eshu is of the Yoruba pantheon, and he is one of the deities. He's the one who represents choices and decisions. He's the one that helps us to reach our destiny and our purpose. They call him the road opener and the trickster. Well, Eshuadara is the part of the energy that fixes broken things to the part that they are better than when they were even new. I cried and I cried and I cried when I read that because I identified so deeply with him. I knew that I needed to be fixed because I was broken. I also realized that I had no idea how. I had no idea how to start. I also realized that I was mad at God. I was mad at my ancestors because if they are so powerful and loving, how did they let all of these bad things happen to me? I realized that I was mad at myself because whether it was in a past life or now, I had to have been a terrible person for all of these bad things to have happened to me, to continue to happen to me. Clearly, I was a terrible person. And clearly, I had to have been unworthy of love. That's the way I thought of myself then. But with the last little bit of hope I had, I prayed. I prayed directly to Eshuodara. In hindsight, what a crazy prayer. But I said, if you're real, help me because I'm broken. And I think I was born broken. But if you do what people say you can do, please restore me because I'm tired. I just want peace. And I cried. And I sat in my car and I just cried. At some point, I realized the time. I wiped my face and I went and I picked up my children and I pretended like I was fine because, mommy has to always be fine, right? Mommy has to always be okay. That's another conversation for another webinar. But that night I fed them and I put them to sleep. And then I cried some more. And that night I cried myself to sleep. The next day I woke up and nothing happened. But the day after that, nothing happened. And the day after that, nothing happened. And this went on for weeks. And I said, okay, so that wasn't real either. But one day I woke up and nothing looked or felt like mine. I can't begin to describe how disconcerting that feeling was. It felt as if I went to sleep, and at some point while I was asleep, somebody replaced my consciousness with someone else's. I don't mean that I woke up and the furniture in the house was different. No, it was all the same. I mean, like someone changed my whole consciousness that night. My kids felt familiar. I knew they were mine. I knew where work was. Yeah, I remember knowing where work was. But it felt like for some reason I was living in someone else's life. I went to what felt like her job, and it felt like it was beneath me. My boyfriend at the time called me and I felt disgusted with him. I believe that the fixing was actually my own mindset. There were times and have been times and continues to be times over the years where I feel like I'm fighting a battle between my old self and my new self, but I continue to live. And I made a decision at that time to no longer accept things that I didn't want. The strangest thing happened. I began to get to know myself. I was 29 years old when I realized and made the earth shattering discovery. I hate spaghetti and I hate white rice. Why is that important? Because I had been cooking them. Most importantly, I didn't even know myself enough to know that I don't like spaghetti. No offense to those who love it. And I don't like white rice. I'm Caribbean. Not liking rice. What I realized is that I had been on autopilot for 14 years. And I felt like I had been in a coma and somebody had just woken me up. Some point at that time, I met my husband. It was over the next year. And it was the first healthy relationship with boundaries and respect that I had ever been in. It was the first relationship that I ever felt safe and protected. But I was still angry. Even as I began to help other people, specifically women with their healing journeys, I was angry. But one day I was listening and counseling a young woman who was telling me about her abuse. She asked me, how are you able to relate so well to my story? And I had to think about it. Well, because it was my story too. That's when I realized that everything that I had endured was for this moment. The elders say you can't prescribe a medicine that you've never taken. Well, I've taken a lot of medicine. The one constant is that earth is medicine. There isn't an ailment that this earth and the forces of nature that work to support her cannot cure. When I was a little girl, and my mom had had enough of my sensitivity, because, baby, I was extremely and am extremely sensitive. She would allow me to run in the rain. I never felt more free to yell and to cry and to scream and to kick than in the rain. When I was a young single mother afraid to go back to a very violent home, I'd sit on the beach for hours and cry while my son, he was so young, would play in the waves. You see, there are medicines that our ancestors used, from herbal baths to steams to teas, to take you back in time. Our ancestors, no matter who or where they are or where they were, they used the earth and the vast resources to heal. The knowledge, that knowledge, is inside of all of us. It's embedded in our genetic memory. And so is the strength to move forward. Now, I can sit here for hours and I can talk to you and I can teach you different healing methods. But let me give you some very important gems. Regardless of the method that you use, it starts with belief and intention. Belief and intention. I'll do you one better and I'll tell you why. Light moves 6 million times faster than sound. So, what you believe is a prayer that is going to move faster than anything that your mouth can say. Remember that these beliefs start in the family. Family is one of the most insulated ways, but community is on a broader scope. Community is medicine. As I began to open my eyes to newness, I welcomed like minded people that wanted to support me. I'll never forget the first time that I understood what it actually felt like to be supported. My mom and my sisters were going on a cruise, and I wanted to go. I needed to go. Single mother, two kids, by myself, no breaks. I needed to go. But at the time, Again, single mother. I was working a job that I was very grateful for, but I absolutely hated it. So I prayed on it. Even after praying and receiving go, I still didn't believe that I could do it. How would I get the time off? Who would watch the kids? Did I even have a cute bathing suit that I can fit into anymore? The important things. And I had just at that point started dating my husband, and I mean just started dating my current husband. And there was no reception on the cruise ship. See, that was important too, how I was going to talk to my new boo. So I asked my ancestors, and they said, go. Ooh, okay, 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 I got it. So I casually mentioned this cruise that I'm not going to probably be able to go to my natal godmother. You see, she owned a school, and my daughter attended that school. And when I say my godmother, she's not my spiritual godmother, but rather she was an elder and is an elder in the community that adopted me and so many others. We call her Mama Olabisi. And so I just casually mentioned to Mama Olabisi that I want to go on this cruise, but it's not for me. Those kind of things I can't do. And so she asked me a very simple question. Why? And I come up with a bunch of excuses. It's irresponsible to spend my money that way. I have bills and I have children and all of these yada, yada, yadas. And she says, well, won't your mother keep the kids? And I said, no, my mom is going on the cruise too. So she's definitely not going to keep the children. And then she says, well, you have 5 aunts. What about them? And I said, no, they don't. No, we don't do that in my family. And she goes, well, you should go anyway. And I laughed because in that conversation, I realized that I am not going to be able to go on this cruise. I go ahead and head to work the full day. And when I return to pick up my daughter from school, Mama Olabisi has organized the community to support me. She and her husband has decided that they'll keep my son, and they have organized a ride for him to get to school and to get home and all of his extracurricular activities. Mama Olabisi has organized for one of the women, the sisters in the community, to watch my daughter and to also make sure that she can get to school, back home, and all of her extracurricular activities. And I'm blown away. I'm blown away. Why did you do this for me? I asked her. Because at this point, remember, I'm sensitive, guys. I'm bawling, crying. And she says to me, because you're family, and we're a communal family. She gives me a hug, and she whispers in my ear, you deserve to be supported. Learn how to accept it. I did go on that cruise. My boyfriend at the time realized, because of the lack of reception, that he wanted to become my husband. Months later, I went to visit him and had a beautiful weekend. He met the children. And as we decided to go home, my car refused to start. I'm not talking about the engine won't turn over. I'm talking about the key won't even turn. Here I am, with 2 children away from home on a Sunday, and I have to work the next day and they have school. And one of the things I noticed was that the entire neighborhood was outside trying to fix my car, a woman they didn't know. He comes inside and he tells me to take a nap. A nap. I couldn't process the thought. I had things to do. I have to figure out how I'm going to get home. I have to figure out how I'm going to get this car fixed. I have to figure out, take a nap. My spirit, who I was becoming more familiar with listening to, told me to trust him. And so I did. In hindsight, that was definitely an issue moment. When I woke up from the nap, he'd arranged for a ride home, a car for me to pick up once I got home so that we can get to work and school, and also a mechanic to fix my car. After work, he met me with the car and the babysitter to keep the children so that I could take him back home. And I realized what my godmother was talking about. This was support. This was what family and community should feel like. This is what is needed to heal. And this is what my ancestors were talking about. It takes a community to help you to realize that there are still great people in the world, that love should not feel like pain, and that you are worthy and deserving of love and support. This is how we heal violence. This is how we heal abuse. This is even how we prevent it. Sankofa, by going back and retrieving, by using our ancestral practices, including community. Very often, we are not the first of our bloodline to go through what we have been through and what we have survived. But together, we can ensure that we are the light. Thank you.
Thank you, Paris Michelle. Oh, just feel that all inside me and carrying it with me, that we all deserve to be supported and how it starts with community. Thank you. And now I will invite Carol to the virtual stage.
Thank you. I'm still taking that in, as some of you may know. And as a mindfulness meditation practitioner, I would like to ask you to just take a moment and maybe close your eyes if you feel comfortable. If not, you can have your eyes open and just soft glaze in front of you and just feel into what's here, just from listening, from cultivating presence and attention through listening, and noticing the quality of your breath, noticing the sensations moving through your body, noticing the internal landscape of this body through sensations. They may be pleasant or unpleasant or neither. And noticing the external aspect, your environment, where you're at, sound, maybe even internal sounds. And just feeling into what we've heard, this beautiful sharing, and how it lands. And through this practice of tracking what is here, we may notice that we are remembering ourselves, our situations. Just notice them and come back to the breath, to the sounds, or to the body. Maybe a place that's neutral, such as your feet on the ground, your hands on your lap. Just feeling in an embodied moment of being present here. and allowing what many indigenous cultures and we believe as the four rivers of intelligence. It's not just the mental, what's going on in our mind states. It's also the realm of intelligence of our physical, the wisdom of our body that goes on to past stuff that brings it to the present and any sensations that may be pleasant or unpleasant or neither. Just calling to our attention what is here. And even the intelligence of the river of emotions. You imagine a body of water. What body of water would that be that represents your emotions in this moment? Would it be a river flowing or an ocean wave coming in? Without judging, you're just noticing. And then the other intelligence, our spirit, spiritual. And for those that might not work, your will. What brought you here to want to be here this afternoon, this morning, wherever you may be? Again, maybe take a few deep breaths, experiencing the element of air moving through us. You may be even touched by the element of water rising your eyes through the share earlier from remembering your own story. And you may also feel the element of fire through warmth, or maybe the lack of fire, certain parts of your body that feels coolness. And the element of earth, that our bones, feeling the weight of our bones and tissues. And understanding that these elements live internally through us, as well as externally. And it is what we share with nature, our great teacher. And when you're ready, you can bring yourself back to listening as you've been listening. Maybe just noticing the transition from earlier to how we feel, to what's here, to what's true, to what may not be true. Just noticing, bringing in the kind witness to be here with you, side by side, as a friendly partner. And just bringing yourself into the room here, listening and remembering. So I like to invite you, just feeling the tenderness myself of this moment of remembering. And I don't think that, I dare to say that maybe there's not a family that does not know this legacy of violence. And, we may remember or been told if we haven't directly experienced. And just honoring those that we remember, including ourselves, if so. So I like to call, this, thank you for the invitation to be here. Just, this calling to a new framework. And, what can heal us at this time with so much happening externally in the world and what's going on in our internal world and how we are relating not only to ourselves, but to each other. So, today I like to talk about a new framework calling upon that, but a new framework that honors the old ways and that meets us in these contemporary times. One that we don't have to let go of one or the other, that we can meet the intersection of where we are. So as prepared, this talk for today, a lot emerged. My own mother, my own maternal lineage of women who worked until the point of no boundaries, tirelessly, and to the point where, as they got older, became ill and exhausted, and found that they themselves did not know who they were, and found that they were left with reflecting about their life, what they could have done, what they should have done, what they would have done. I just recently left my mother who's struggling and who has a background of domestic abuse. And she can remember sharply and still reflects in her age that she is now at 75, reflecting what could have been done differently, taking it almost upon herself for her choices, and not acknowledging the cultural component or the family perspective. Not all family legacies need to continue. And this is a time and opportunity to break away from that legacy that no longer serves us and to heal it. So I just brought her attention as I was listening, and asked her about, how is she inhabiting her body now as she's sharing her story. And it was such a privilege to be able to listen to her, and at the same time, a very emotional moment for me, of someone who gave so much, and for me to even be here in this moment, in this seat. So I point to and ask for a new framework, one that acknowledges that, we honor some of the old ways that are useful, that are rooted in healing, that are rooted in the qualities of our ethics and values, that expands our own understanding of who we are, that allows us to come home to truth and power, that acknowledges self-empowerment through the presence of trust, truth, and love. And in order to really drop into understanding this path of self-reflecting and healing, there's a need to be a good tracker. It's not an indigenous culture that doesn't have a system of tracking. And in this case, for a healing component, tracking of, as my late beloved teacher, Basque elder Angeles Arien, Arien, would often say, from her cultural understanding that her elders taught her, when did we stop singing? When did we stop dancing? When did we stop being enchanted by stories? And when did we stop feeling the sweet territory of silence? And this acknowledgement, I think, was even spoken a little bit about this morning, this retrieving, I believe, was said, this retrieving of the spirit to come back into the embodiment of oneself. And to notice that through this practice, without judging, we start to realize that, in fact, we can't be in the sweet territory of silence because fear arises. That we start to judge that we can't feel the way of dancing because we lost joy. And even singing, for that matter. But you see, this is represented in indigenous cultures in all four corners of the world, that we have, a culture of dance, songs, stories of why we're here and how we heal ourselves and in our community. And really, what was spoken earlier was how do we wake ourselves up from the procession of the living dead? This automatic pilot, I believe, is what was said. This numbness, this checking out. And I'm not speaking to maybe solitude versus isolation. There is a difference. Isolation is cutting off, and solitude is a self-retreat, taking a moment to retreat back and remember. And even, the teachings, for me, let me take a second here. When I think of this new framework, I think of a braided way, one that she often spoke about. A braided way where, again, you don't leave out any of the old that's been going on for thousands of years that is useful. And one that doesn't sacrifice the creativity or the new or the innovation of now. That even in this technology, we can honor, and there's an overlap of indigenous technology as well as this cyberspace technology. They go really hand in hand. They both work in the realm of the unseen world. And, this braided way is, really coming into a both and world, a both and perspective, not a perspective of either or. So it's a unifying oneself. And in my case, I look at the strands that make my braid. And one strand is the indigenous wisdom ancestrally that run through me. And the other strand is the Buddha Dharma, Theravada Buddhism that I came into as a young adult, that I was adopted into. I had no relation to a Thai Buddhist perspective, but something in my young self just knew the wisdom of the Buddha's teachings was deep in my being. And interesting enough, it took me thousands of miles to go away from home, to come back home to my ancestral lineage, and to go into the healing component of ritual and ceremony. in particular Native American, intertribal. It took more than a village to heal me. And my other strand, which is the third strand of this braid, is my love for the great mystery, the unknown, the unseen. And I can speak a lot about that. But this braided way, it took me about 15 years to braid and integrate the intersections of who I am, to really come into a way of healing and also a way of presence that empowered me to know what is true for me, to know how to put boundaries, how to begin to start saying no. Because coming from a culture where, it's really a culture of yes, I would never say no to my elders. But sometimes those yeses mean no inside. And each time I said yes to something internally that was no, a part of me died. So pretty soon, you're in situations and people and places that you don't want to be because of all the yeses, when in your heart you meant no. So learning how to really recognize what nurtures you and knowing your own boundary, knowing what is true for you without losing yourself. I'm not saying you can't compromise, but knowing yourself enough to know that you don't abandon yourself. And that was one thing that actually my elder taught a lot about, this false self system healing, the shadow side of us, this side of, we leave ourselves, we abandon ourselves, for major reasons. One, for someone else's love, pretending to be other than who you are in order to get someone else's love. We abandon ourselves for someone's acceptance and approval without even realizing that we are seeking approval, when it actually happens to be an internal process. Another reason to abandon is just to keep the peace, to be in harmony, to maintain balance, avoiding difficult situations, not wanting to meet the tension because what it can bring. But each time we do any of these major reasons that we abandon ourselves, we lose a part of ourselves. So it doesn't surprise us at any point in our life that we may find we might not know who we are or know what we want, or even yet what has heart and meaning in our life. So to really come in and start to develop a practice of knowing what has heart and meaning that can guide us. One where your heart is open instead of being closed. And that could be a good start, because for many reasons we close our heart to protect ourselves. I remember having this one Japanese Zen master who often said, we've been hurt, no matter what the hurt is. He would describe each hurt He used the metaphor of a very thin rice paper. And in that very thin rice paper, we wrap it around our heart each time we're hurt. And before we know it, he says, if you become my age, you have a thick wall of this rice paper, and not even the best of blades can cut through it to open you up. So really tracking each time that we are protecting our heart as a form of closing it, closing ourselves from the possibility of being open. So I want to be aware of time because I can go on and talk. Can someone tell me how I'm doing with time in the chat or something?
Yes, we are pretty much coming up on our end point. So
Right.
if you want to, wrap us up and then we will end on
Great.
that note. Thank you.
So the next thing that I will close up with is, this coming into this practice of what has heart and meaning, and learning to open one's heart and to heal the closed heart, and to really understand that clarity arises from that, and to understand that strength arises from that. So I want to leave us with the possibility of working with nature as a form, as a teacher, and looking and pointing to the cycles of life, the cycles of the season, the cycles of the elements, as a way of coming back into one's own original medicine, where your gifts and purpose lie. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Just coming back, coming back in. And I love how you describe braiding these pieces together. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This is our first session in this new series. We hope to see you in June. And there will be a brief survey that will be shared. Once this closes, it'll also be shared in a follow-up email. And this full session will be available in our webinar library. Please share your input with us in the survey. And I hope that we can see all of you in June. All right. Take care and thank you.